Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome from me to the conference today. Imagine walking down a street where almost every home is boarded up. Paint is peeling from empty doorways, weeds are creeping through the cracks in the pavement, the silence is louder than the traffic, and the one thing more visible than the decay is the sense that no one in power ever intended to come back. That was the reality in Granby, Liverpool, just a few decades ago. Once a thriving neighbourhood in Toxteth, Granby's streets were hit hard by decades of neglect. After the 1981 riots, local confidence collapsed. Investment dried up, families left, whole rows of homes were emptied, and by the 1990s, Granby looked like it had been abandoned by history itself. But while local government appeared to write it off, a handful of local residents refused to walk away. They began by sweeping the streets, not in protest, not for a photo opportunity, but because they believed, stubbornly, quietly, that their community still had a future. They painted the boarded up windows, planted flowers in bathtubs, scrubbed graffiti off the brickwork. They brought beauty back to the place even when it seemed that no one was watching. And they did something remarkable. They took ownership, literally. They formed a community land trust, and in partnership with architects, artists, and the people who actually lived there, they began to restore the homes street by street. Not to gentrify them, but to make them affordable, dignified, and designed with care. They didn't just save houses, they saved a community. In 2015, this grassroots effort won the Turner Prize, not for a gallery installation, but for homes, for neighbourhoods, for the kind of creativity that grows from hope, paint, and a deep belief in one another. Today, Granby Four Streets is visible proof that even the most neglected communities can write a new chapter in their book if they are trusted, resourced, and allowed to lead their own recovery. That is the power and potential of community, of people. What makes us human is not just our brains and our systems, but our bondness and our togetherness. Our survival and progress have always depended on our capacity to imagine, build, and sustain communities. Now, in one sense, we are living in incredible times. We've cured or managed many diseases that used to kill millions. We have access to vastly more information than any generation before us. We are able to access foods, entertainment, and ideas from across the planet. And we live longer, healthier lives on average. What an age to be alive. And yet there is an enormous struggle too. Loneliness and isolation are becoming greater. A recent ONS survey reported that 1 in 4 adults in Great Britain experience loneliness often, always, or some of the time. And the Times recently found that the UK has the highest rates of loneliness amongst young adults in the whole of Europe. Mental and physical health has been in decline. A new NHS report over the summer found sharp increases again in rates of anxiety, depression, and some other disorders. A sense of tribalism, detached from immediate community, and most often found or originating online, is growing, and misinformation is becoming a feature of life. We have all the ingredients we need for health and prosperity, for fulfilling lives. What we are missing is the sense of togetherness, belonging, and for too many, the chance or confidence to participate in the unprecedented opportunities that exist. And this increasingly defines our times. And I now believe, colleagues, this is the leadership issue of a generation. Diminishing participation, connection, togetherness, and a shared sense of purpose or moral endeavour in communities underpins so many of the issues we face, not just as an education system, but as a nation. Education is not just about knowledge, it is about awakening the potential of others. Yet we've gradually come to the position that our system must manage crises after crises. Public service leadership has been tasked with making literally everything all right. Let me just run through some of the crises we've experienced in education. Doing your best with a lack of sufficient resource or expertise to support the ever-growing numbers of pupils with SEND. The attendance crisis, the behaviour crisis, the well-being crisis, the obesity crisis, the climate change, global warming crisis, the funding crisis. Crisis after crises after crises now laid almost solely at your doors by policymakers, policy wonks, and increasingly the public. Ofsted frameworks increasingly expect you to be accountable for things that are outside the circle of control of trust CEOs and school leaders, ramping up stress, pressure, and expectation on institutions, reducing bandwidth, and stretching depleted finances further. And a growing cultural trend is reinforced where public, the communities, have too often become customers rather than partners with responsibility. Indeed, I saw a post on social media the other day where a member of the public took a photograph from outside his front door, complaining about a weed on his street. "What do I pay my council tax for?" he said. Back in Granby, they planted flowers in bathtubs. Here, nature was being reported for antisocial behaviour. In seriousness, too many communities are now either disengaged or feel disempowered, or both. The citizen has too often become the customer. And we've seen the roles and responsibilities of trusts and schools expand and grow in recent years without any proper attempt to define a national vision or clear sense of purpose for education or communities. And caring leaders with moral purpose absorb responsibility. I know many have put this down to depleted services since the age of austerity. To some extent, that is true, but it is revealing of what's happened almost unnoticed in that time. Because even more significant, to my mind, is a demand on services as a result of the decline of community and community responsibility. As a result, the complexity of leadership has ramped up enormously. And I think it's time we were honest, even as people who care enormously and bring huge collective talent and determination and moral purpose, that there are limits. It's fast becoming unsustainable. Leaders sometimes speak to me of the guilt they feel in not being able to do everything, which is frankly heartbreaking. And this increasingly asking the almost impossible, if not impossible, reinforces the growing sense of distrust in public services that the population has because they're coming to expect it all as customers. In a well-functioning society, the state works alongside and in the encouragement of community. But today, it is increasingly taking on the traditional responsibilities of community. Good people, good public service leaders are filling the vacuum, but their jobs are becoming harder and more thankless. What are we losing in the meantime? The family that would know if the other family across the road is okay. The understanding that one another's children would behave and be respectful as a community norm. The concern a community would show if one child didn't arrive for school on time, or the concern and support a family facing illness or hardship would receive from their neighbours. More significantly, in too many cases, the role of parents in reading and playing with their children, the role of communities in creating opportunities for play, sport, and togetherness, the role of families in regulating technology use and providing direction around its healthy and constructive use. I was astounded a few weeks ago to read a political scientist writing in a national newspaper refer to the concept of the exam-passing classes as a distinct section of society, essentially from the perspective of those who feel detached and disenfranchised from wider society and the education system. This, for me, was the disconnect coldly set out in print. The detachment from involvement in public services and the possibility that education and learning provides is a worrying trend. Volunteerism is down, absenteeism is up, Parental complaints are up. People are more than ever detached critics of public services. Now, Jonathan Sacks, the late Jonathan Sacks, talks about a shared morality in the sense of it being a shared and collective purpose. In his view, the underpinning of society, essentially our collective moral endeavour. He writes, "Society is constituted by a shared morality. A free society is a moral achievement, and it is made by us and our habits of thought, speech, and deed. Morality cannot be outsourced because it depends on each of us. When morality is outsourced to either the market or the state, society has no substance, only systems." He goes on, "Morality achieves something almost miraculous and fundamental to human achievement and liberty. It creates trust. It means that to the extent that we belong to the same moral community, the stronger the bonds of community, the more powerful the force of trust, and the more we achieve together." Finally, I quote, "Where there is no shared morality, there is no society. Instead, there are subgroups and hence identity politics. The result is division, cynicism, and the breakdown of trust." Sound familiar? The truth is that many of the headwinds that our education system now faces, including a lack of readiness for school, absenteeism, childhood obesity, numerous special educational needs, poor behaviour, and disengagement of some parents in learning and technology regulation beyond the school gates, fundamentally comes down to an erosion of a shared sense of community endeavour and, dare I say it, shared sense of responsibility and purpose. The village has in too many cases seemingly become detached from its long-held responsibility to raise the child. Many have retreated into their own individual boxes. Indeed, it, like so many other things, are too often considered something to be outsourced. Now, just as strategy eats culture for breakfast, just as culture eats strategy for breakfast, so too community power and responsibility, or lack of it, eats national policy for lunch and dinner. As a system, we have reinforced this shift. We have lost sight of this following an era where central solutions and systems in the form of Ofsted, national strategies, and national colleges were seen as the primary and predominant drivers of improvement. From the point of view of communities, this all feels remote and may have exacerbated the sense of powerlessness and disengagement over time. It's now time to look to the past to shape our future, with modern tools and modern ideas, and with a combination of professional boldness and humility. There are, as I see it, two choices for this generation of leaders. One is to lead organisations that take on more and more of the responsibilities of communities and families, so that responsibility is outsourced and increasingly disowned, in some sort of expectation that trusts and schools are whole-scale providers of children's services, not simply incubators of learning and potential. The growth of dependency in a financially limited context is a zero-sum game. Or we see our role as encouragers, enablers, and expectants of the community and family responsibility and ownership, breaking the cycle of dependence and apathy by equipping communities and families and holding them to account. The emphasis on pure accountability, accountability that is local, two-way, and formative, as being a collective effort where trusts and schools commit to parents and communities, but parents and communities also commit to schools. That's far from the current national tone. What is pure accountability? AI is brilliant at telling you this now, even better than Forum Strategy, who created it. But this is just a quick reminder of the role of pure accountability. Now, this shift to the second is hard for leaders who care and care deeply, and also where the presiding culture of accountability stealthily leaves even more at your door. And let's be honest, the done-to approach is often so much easier than the done-with in the short term, when targets loom and pressures build. And whilst maybe naive, I believe in the potential of community in the long run. And I also see trust setting the tone more and more, equipping and enabling families and communities, providing the conditions for the pursuit of parental qualifications, engaging communities on vision and ideas, providing space for the community's use, developing meaningful volunteer strategies and initiatives, and expecting parents and communities to play their part as constructive partners in shared endeavour. This comes back to our innate instincts. Sociobiologists have argued that we are hardwired for cooperation, not because we are saintly, but because group cohesion and shared goals ensure survival. The term eusocial from biology often describes species like ants or bees that organise around shared care, division of labour, and collective survival. But we go beyond even that. In *Sapiens*, historian Yuval Noah Harari explores how Homo sapiens came to dominate the planet, not through superior strength, speed, or even intelligence, but through our unique ability to cooperate flexibly. Sapiens rule the world because they are the only animal that can cooperate flexibly in large numbers. This capacity, Harari explains, was born from what he terms a cognitive revolution, a shift that enabled humans to create shared myths, moral orders, and imagined realities. These became the foundation of community, allowing us to trust others, form tribes, cities, and nations, create belief systems and social contracts, raise children in villages of shared responsibility, and build institutions of collective learning like schools. Through these imagined communities, humans created and reinforced the foundations of complex societies, capable of storytelling, trade, democracy, and education. It was not our tools that made us powerful, but our trust in one another. In recent years, we've come to rely more and more on the done to, but it's clear that the most top-down or national solutions in education so often disappear or become discontinued after a decade or so at best. Remember Sure Start? Remember the National College? Remember London Challenge? Will RISE still be here in 5 years' time? Who knows? They tend to come and go. Meanwhile, you remain the same and the communities you serve remain the same. Now, don't get me wrong, the solution to some of these pressing issues we face remains better policy and storytelling at a national level. Thoughtful and mindful regulation and oversight, as well as national culture and investment, matter. However, for those outside of central government, leading institutions such as academy trusts and schools, the more profound and lasting solutions increasingly depend on community-centred leadership. Solutions driven from the bottom up, from personal and collective responsibility. Because communities at their most thriving are the social glue. They are the cornerstones of a culture that prizes and sustains learning, social capital and reciprocity, health and well-being, well beyond the school gates. What I'm not talking about here is less leadership or more leadership. I'm talking about a different kind of leadership. Some may get bored of this, but it comes right back to Forum Strategy's most powerful mantra over the last decade: leadership that looks outwards at least as much as it looks upwards. It's time to reimagine public service leadership, not to do more and more and more, but to do things differently. And this gets to the theme of this conference, the role of CEO going forward. And as one of the most innovative and forward-thinking examples of public service leadership, I believe trust CEOs can and must set the direction here using your autonomy and role as local leaders. We need you to tell the story in words and actions, beacons of possibility, models of togetherness, champions of shared moral endeavour. This is the opposite of the caricature of the remote CEO in a distant office looking at spreadsheets. As Hilary Cottam describes the growth of the welfare state like this, she says, "The role of relationships in sustaining change seems absurdly obvious, and yet relationships are never designed into any of our solutions. Today, the welfare state concentrates on the efficient delivery of inputs and outcomes, trapping us in the cultures and mechanisms of transaction and limiting human connection." Governments remembered the systems, but they forgot the foundation of community, of the social glue, of the social covenant that has bound communities, families, and more latterly, institutions in collective responsibility for generations and generations until now. With the opportunity and freedoms you have, trusts cannot afford to do the same. Yes, it's fundamentally about exceptional systems, but it's also about culture too. In 2019, I published Forum Strategy's new narrative for a new decade, namely a vision for academy trusts at the heart of their communities. I spoke at this conference 6 years ago of the role of CEO as community leader. It was the right sentiment and has been embraced in vision statements across the sector and other sector bodies since. But it had a blind spot. While I see trusts making great strides on one level, not least in building relationships with business, charities and one another to enhance provision, on another level, sand is falling away beneath the system's feet. Communities themselves need to be better involved, enabled and empowered and genuinely heard with a sense of ownership. And in many cases, this is hard, but it's the only way. As this month's new report from Forum Strategy's CEO System Leaders Programme says, locality leadership represents a fundamental shift from leading an organisation in a place to leading as part of the fabric of that place. What key steps can trusts and CEOs take here? Well, back in the summer symposium, we talked about what was within your circle of control and within your circle of influence. And these are the things we will be considering. First of all, a shared story, a shared sense of moral endeavour. The vision and narrative for trust should speak directly to communities. These are the stories, just like those that bound our Homo sapien ancestors. It shouldn't be written for Ofsted or for other education professionals. It should awaken and mobilise a genuine sense of community identity, need and aspiration. A belief in the power of the collective to serve the next generation. This sense of identity and possibility must be communicated by trust leaders so that it is owned again by all those you lead and work alongside. Our shared story. Secondly, wider participation. Trusts and schools can better embrace volunteerism. This means giving local bodies a genuine and focused role in being the champions of their communities. But more broadly, it should aspire to the level of volunteerism we see in the NHS and the police, ensuring trusts have a strategy to identify and harness the genuine talents, expertise, knowledge and capacity around them. Trusting communities to help us address their issues and challenges through partnering with them, enabling them to work better with us. Thirdly, a shared responsibility. Trust should embrace what I termed as pure accountability back in 2020. This is giving the community, including parents and pupils, a genuine voice in the direction of the trust and a means of informing, shaping and holding to account the collective vision and direction of the organisation in a non-high-stakes way. This provides a greater sense of ownership, and I've developed my thinking here too. Pure accountability shouldn't just be about the institution being accountable to the community, but families, parents and young people being responsible and committed to their community and the institutions that work with them. They are not customers or clients, they are partners and participants. Fourthly, a sense of place. Trust should ensure that their schools remain hubs of the community, not taking on all the roles and responsibilities, but providing spaces, places, and a means of connection alongside other great cornerstones of the community as the community centre, the church, and the local pub. And by the way, as a newly appointed quiz master at my local pub, I stumped everyone the other week by asking how many education secretaries there'd been since 2014. Fifthly, a board of wisdom. Trust should carefully consider how immersed the board is with the community. Does the board include well-recognised community leaders and those who provide employment and other key services? Indeed, in terms of policy, I think rather than scaling up trusts so they become more remote from their local communities, we should look at a community ownership model through the members structure, considering how members can be elevated, bringing participation from the local community so that they can take part in the trust life and work as members themselves. I'm really interested in this notion of community ownership through membership, and it's going to be interesting today to hear a little bit more from the Co-op CEO about how that works in that organisation. And finally, the storyteller CEO should be active and visible champions of their communities, celebrating success and achievements, highlighting the pressures and needs at a regional and national level, and forging impactful relationships with other local bodies in efforts to empower communities and families as partners. This is now a fundamental part of the Academy Trust CEO role. Colleagues, it is only on this basis that we can play our urgent part in collectively addressing the underlying issues and seize the opportunities that this generation of pupils face, many of which begin and reinforce themselves outside the school gates. It is also important that the government recognises this. In a well-functioning society, community will always be the foundation. And when the state takes on more and more of communities' responsibility rather than empowering them and enabling them, it becomes financially and otherwise unsustainable. We've been fast approaching this place. So as Tony Blair spoke of education, 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 it's now time for Keir Starmer to speak of the power and potential of community, community, community. It is the only sustainable way forward on so many of the challenges he and the country faces. It's also the only sustainable way forward on so many of the challenges the education system faces. More piecemeal policy, more bolt-on responsibilities, more pockets of funding for short-term initiatives aren't enough. They're good for headlines, they're bad for sustainable change. There is a cultural emphasis required that must be supported by national policy, a rediscovery of the all now often too latent power and potential of communities up and down the land, on rediscovering and speaking of hope and opportunity by coming together in a divided world. People ultimately care deeply. They care about their families, their environment, their communities, and the future of the next generation. As Margaret Wheatley says, there is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. As Bregman says in Humankind, A Hopeful History, most people deep down are pretty decent. He argues that our species succeeded not because we're aggressive, but because we're friendly, more willing to cooperate, empathize, and form complex social networks than other species. In today's world, I suggest it's just that a sense of disempowerment and disconnection has set in. We need to overcome this. As leaders, you can help to change the tide. But it requires a radical approach and a shift in mindset. It requires courage, it requires conviction, and it requires unshakable belief in the power of people and communities. Where will we discover that, if not with you? Probably the most important role for this generation of trust and school leaders is to reawaken and seek to help communities realise the old adage that it takes a village to raise a child. Community enabling leadership is now at a premium. I am not naive, I am optimistic. I believe in people. As educationalists, we all believe in the potential of people. That's what we do. However hard it is to see at times, we find it. We see it, we encourage it, we unleash it. I end with this from Charles Leadbeater. People are not the problem, they are the solution. The future comes from the margins. Thank you.